Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Webtoon Wave. I have a really awesome guest today. She is the creator of Soul on Fire on Webtoon Canvas. Thank you for coming on the podcast, Ty.
Hi, thank you. I'm excited to talk with you today.
Me too. I'm so excited to get into your journey and your Webtoon. I just absolutely adore your Webtoon and your art style, so this is going to be really fun.
Thank you. I'm excited too. I'll yap all day about it. Let's do it.
Same. Could yap all day. Okay, so I'll just start out. What inspired you to create Soul on Fire?
Oh, I mean, a lot of things inspired me. As like a creative, a lot of things inspire you and things like that. And you always, I mean, I've been drawing and painting since I was like 5 years old. So
Wow.
yeah, so I gather a lot of like inspo and things like that. And you already know that you just start to develop like your own characters
Mm-hmm.
and things. I feel like it's a way for you to like relate to something in a way. And I don't know, I meant to send you the link to this video, but it's about this guy who did the concept art. I'm blanking on his name right now, which is so embarrassing, but he did the concept art for Star Wars, like for the outfits and things like that.
Oh.
And he talked about like, like just to help artists like draw what inspires you or like what moves
Mm.
you. So like a really good thing is like have a book, just write down what moves you, period. Like it doesn't have to be like a song or anything specific. Like if
Mm-hmm.
it just made you feel a certain way, like, because if you draw or write or paint or do something that moves you, like you're really into it and your heart's into it. And I was like, well, I have all these things compiled. Why don't I just put it into one thing? Just like Soul on Fire is basically just my whole self-indulgent comic. That's just like I'm gonna put everything I like into it, just
Mm-hmm.
because like there's media where has certain things you like and certain things you don't like, and you're like, I just want one big thing of all of it,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
was my thing. I was like, yes, I'm gonna have trope upon trope in this thing.
Love it. Love it.
But yeah, other than that, like music too is also a big thing. Like you hear something and you just have this whole scene in your head and you're like, I gotta get that down.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, that would just be what basically inspired that. And like
Yeah.
hot to be men, I'm not afraid to say it. Like I
Yes.
spent so long, I was like, I just need to draw a hot guy.
Oh
That's
yeah.
all I want to do and get paid for it.
Yes. That's the dream, right? Draw
Yep.
hot guys and get money.
Yep. I mean, I don't like get money really for anything just because like being a housewife, I I just kind of like cook and clean, do what I need to
Mm-hmm.
do, and then my husband is like very sweet, and he's like, "Yeah, just do your thing, do what you want, get
Yeah.
it started and things." And so that's super nice to have, so I do get to like draw and create a lot, but
Yeah.
doesn't stop me from being burnt out and things like that, but
Yeah. So what were I mean, I know a lot of the tropes in Soul on Fire, but what are your favorite tropes that you included?
there's so many, but the ones I definitely like, obviously, like the golden retriever and black cat
Mm-hmm.
vibes. Like that is my all-time favorite trope, and I'm just like, I need this in here. Or like, the grumpy guy with like the sunshine girl
Yeah.
vibes like that. I also like the idiot and idiot in progress. Like that is my absolute favorite, especially
Yeah.
when just when two idiot characters get together and they're just like they share one brain cell and they're up to no good.
Yeah, I really enjoy those tropes too, especially the golden retriever black cat dynamic where one of them is just happy go lucky, like just positive, and the other one's just grumpy, broody,
Yeah.
introverted.
Oh, just angsty as all get out, which is like
Mm-hmm.
Nika to a T. Like, man, just a grumpy guy who doesn't really enjoy anything loud, so that's why like So
Mm-hmm.
Shy, my other character, just annoys the heck out of him. Cause he is all just fun and games all the time, and Nika's
Mm-hmm.
like straight angst, like trauma.
Yeah.
Like it's not a phase, mom.
You said that you had started drawing and painting when you were around 5. How did you find your art style? Because yours is very distinctive and emotive and expressive.
Thank you. I've never heard that about my work. Someone called it anime boyification, and I was like, I'll take that. Honestly, like,
Yeah.
I'm with that. But I'm also like a traditional artist at heart. I actually only got into like digital art not too long ago. I want to say maybe like 3 4 years ago, like really like into it, because
Mm-hmm.
before I was just like doing it here and there, but wanting to figure out a career, I was just like, really everything I want to do is digital, so now I really need to like hone in and do it, because it was just like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I'll buy Procreate, things like that. I was just like, oh, I really need to hone in here. So my style traditionally is very different from like my art style, like digitally and things like that, just because I'm a realism artist when it comes to like
Mm.
traditional painting, because I'm a portrait artist. I do, a lot of things like that. So it was really hard to transition over, because I was like, I'd really, I'm into anime, I'm into animation, I'm into all these things. So realism doesn't really, translate into that. And so I was
Mm-hmm.
like, I really want something I'm into. So starting my art style was just like kind of looking into artists and shows, you know, and kind of just taking aspects from it and putting it in my own art. So that's why I'm always super flattered when people are like, oh my gosh, like, is it okay if I love the way you do this? I do it in my work now. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, that's so heartwarming. Or like, I've had a couple people who like use my work for like light study, which is like such an honor.
Wow.
Like, I
Yeah.
love when anyone does it, because I'm also like a whore for light. I'm a light whore. I love lighting, I love doing it. And so I'm like, oh yes, please, like, because that's how I found my art style, was basically just like, doing studies off of other people's work. And I'm like, oh, I really like how they do noses, so I'm
Mm-hmm.
gonna do that. But just like, I'll end up over time like adding my own flair to it, or just anything
Yeah.
I'm really into watching. Like, I think that's why it's such a tricky thing when you find your art style, because you're like, oh, I don't want to like copy this person, but I really like when they do that. And it's like, well, that's fine. Like, you can study their work and things like that. Personally, like, I take it as an honor and things like that. That's just how you find yourself. You just do it. And then sometimes you're just like, man, this is actually not for me. Like,
Yeah.
making the nose or eye like this only works in this particular angle, and I want to do it like all angles. And so it's just like, it's ever changing too. Like, I notice now that I'm starting to do different things, or like, especially when you want to start like expanding your style and things
Mm-hmm.
like that. Now, because I want to be more inclusive in terms of like, after I got called anime boyification, I was like, that's fair.
Yeah, I think that's a route that a lot of artists take as they develop their art style. They look at what their favorite artists are doing and then try to kind of implement aspects of that into their own style. Obviously, you don't want to directly copy an artist, but
Yeah.
I've done that as I've grown and tried to figure out my own art style. I really like clean art style or clean line art, uh,
I've noticed some of the
simplistic
cleanest
rendering.
in the game.
Huh?
Some of the cleanest art style in the game. So I'm just like, oh, I love looking at your line art.
Thank you. Thank you. It's my favorite part, but it's also the most time consuming part for me. Um, yeah, with your art style, it's very complex. There's a lot of layers, there's a lot of detail, not only in just the line art, and there's a lot of detail in the rendering. So tell me about your art process and what does that look like as you're drawing?
Well, it is very chaotic. I will say that. Like, I mean, I work from start to finish chronologically. Like, you have a sketch and then you do things like that. So at least, like, I'm not too worried about some of my lines being clean. At least for my webtoon, I do line it out and make sure everything's super clean. But with some of the stuff I post, like on Instagram and things like that, or my sketches, I won't have that be as clean, just because like rendering can like make it or elevate it in a way. But at least like my process includes like a lot of layers and just I don't know, it's so hard to explain in a way because my there's everyone's process is different, and process to me is just like, okay, well, I do like my line art, I get my flats, and then after my flats I figure out my lighting by like, making a multiply layer, and then I do like, depending on the scene, like hard light, glow dodge, and then all everything else on top of that. Like, I'm a layer
Mhm.
queen.
Yeah.
So my stuff is like layers upon layers upon layers upon like groupings and things like that. So I'm always like, I was collaborating the other day with some friends, and like we were sending the Clip Studio file around, and it was like, please don't look at all my layers that I have going on because it's just don't. It's embarrassing. It's all over the place, and they were just laughing. Yeah, it's just everything I do. I just add a layer just in case because I'm very indecisive and I hate
Mhm.
commitment. So I'm just like, I'll put it on this layer, see if I like it, and then also I adjust. Just like adjusting can save your life. So like the lighting's not super intense or that it makes this, that, but
You kind of just go with what feels good.
yeah, just kind of like
Yeah.
vibes.
Mhm. If it makes you feel any better, a lot of my more complex illustrations have a lot of layers as well. I think some of them have probably over 100
Oh my gosh.
layers. Yeah, just I mean, that kind of comes down to me not being as experienced in art as other people. And so I tend to make copies of layers and hide them just in case I mess something up.
Oh yeah, no, that is a thing. I do that too because again, I'm afraid of commitment. I'm afraid of messing up. So especially when like you're going to do something that's like permanent to that layer, you know, and if you don't like it later on, you can't just like undo, undo, undo because it only undoes so many times. So I definitely make layers, like duplicate layers all the time, save them. So don't worry. I don't know how I can tell which is what, so I can usually color code it because you can change the color of the layers in Clip
Mhm.
Studio. So I'll just make a rainbow and I'll be like, I know that one. So I usually make my line art layer like a black color.
Mhm.
So I'm just like, there it is. And that's usually how I find like my landmark,
Mhm.
just within all my layers.
Yeah. I do that too. I have a flats assistant and I will send them my Clip Studio files, and a lot of the time I have a separate so I work in vector layers for my line art. So we'll
Mm-hmm.
have a layer for like the hair, a layer for eyes, a layer for the body, a layer for clothes, just because I just worry that I'll mess something up and I won't be able to go
Fair.
back and fix it.
No,
Yeah,
vector layers are superior.
they really are. Any beginner artist who is learning digital art, if you can learn, like if the software you use has vector layers, I would highly recommend doing that for your line art because it makes things so much easier, especially if you want to, like, if you're a Webtoon artist, and it makes it easier if you want to reuse panels because I do that all the time. I'll have a panel where maybe the character is like waist up, and then I'll have another panel where I zoom in on their face, and it just makes it easier to use because you don't lose the resolution.
Absolutely. Because that's like the worst when you have like the perfect, like, like the perfect angle, everything you need. Like I don't usually like reuse things a lot, but when I do, it's really nice when you have it saved in a vector, just because like, selection also makes it easier too because I'm a big selector tool person.
Hmm.
So just selecting something and setting your, vector layer as a reference, it makes everything a lot cleaner and easier to like navigate.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Definitely. Is there any advice you would give to a beginner artist starting out? Maybe things that helped you in the past when you were also, I mean, you've been doing it for a long time, but
I would say study the basics. So I've had some people like DM ask that same question, and I was like, "Oh, I love to talk, I love to yap." So, I mean, I'm always open to DMs. So if you ever DM me about it, I will literally talk your ear off. But so one thing I suggest is like, just the basics, especially if you want to get into character design, which is like I love. you need to study anatomy, like, period. Like, even if you
Mhm.
have a super, like, stylized style, like, and your stuff looks like a very, like, or you want it to look a certain way, but, you know, realism isn't your thing, well, that's totally fine, but it's very hard to stylize something when you don't know, like, the foundation.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
doing character design and things like that, like you really need to study anatomy, you need to study like the face, things like that, because in the long run, when you start to stylize things, it makes it easier, especially because you know where things are supposed to be. And so when you start making things like different or like you want different proportions here, you know how the body works and it doesn't look off,
Mhm.
if that makes sense. So that's why like a lot of the stylized characters you see sometimes, like they still look like, you know, they don't look wonky. Like they may look super exaggerated and things, but it's really important to like know the basics just so that you can, you know, kind of break the rules. It's knowing the rules
Yeah.
so you can break them in a way that isn't like difficult. And so that's why because I started it too before I really got into anatomy, but like especially like anime like faces, some people like really struggle with that just because like they only put like, you know, minimal amount of lines on the face because that's just how that style is. But the thing is, like, they put the lines where it matters.
Mhm.
And that is knowing, like, the planes of the face, like, where the nose is, like, you know, how you can make it so you can draw the face at any angle. So just knowing that, that is just my number one tip. Like, I don't really know, like, for environment design because, again, I'm more into characters and things like that. That's just what I recommend. Like, know the basics. And I know it's going to be boring, it's going to be hard, and it's going to be like, oh man, this is really frustrating. That's fine. Like, you don't have to get it perfect, but like just having that knowledge so you can later on just kind of like bend the rules to your liking, and it'll make stylizing things a lot easier because you're like, oh, I already know how this looks in real life, I want it to look like this but exaggerated.
Yeah. I think that's really good advice. It can be frustrating sometimes because anatomy takes so long to get
Hmm.
competent at. I think when I was doing some research back in the day, experts were saying that if you were consistently working on learning anatomy, it might take you a couple years to get competent enough at it. And I also think it's a really good piece of advice to know the rules before you break them because you'll know how, like you said, you'll know how to stylize your characters in certain ways that make sense because anatomically everything is proportionate and makes sense, but you can then go and change the features how you'd like, stuff like that.
Definitely. And also don't let anyone tell you using a reference is cheating. No, I use references all the time. Like how, like, yeah, like I studied anatomy and things like that, but I'll tell you what, it is so hard to draw stuff from my mind. Like I set up a reference every time. If I need a pose, I do this. Like I know some people are like, well, you should just be able to do it, pull it out of your mind. And it's like, well, not every, like, you know, you don't have to be a great artist. Like, that doesn't have to be one of your standards, I guess. Like, if you can do it, like,
Mhm.
yeah, it's nice, but looking at a reference is so important so you can see, like, how things move. And again, you can adjust to your liking. It doesn't always have to be exactly to the reference, but it's so much easier on your mind, especially like, you know, because sometimes I use 3D models sometimes just depending on like, man, I really can't draw today. Or I'm
Mhm.
like, I just need an underlying structure.
Yeah.
But it's just like, oh, that reference is there. Now I can really see how this moves. I can just simplify it so that it's not that hard to put on paper.
Yeah. I think people think 3D model figures are taboo and you should stay away from them, but
They're
I
so
think they make the process easier. You can get a general outline of the figure doing that. Like it's not always like anatomically, like if you're trying to pose a 3D model, it's you have to actually kind of know how the human form is supposed to look in a certain pose, like where the weight is, what the muscles look like at certain angles. And generally a 3D model isn't going to tell you all of that super well, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I know what you mean because sometimes like I've seen personally where it's just like, oh, that's where your brain kind of has to like connect the dots.
Mhm.
Where it's like because the 3D model isn't like not all of them at least are rigged to move exactly how the body moves,
Mm-hmm.
because that would take so much, I'm not sure what exactly goes into like 3D modeling things or like creating something like
Mm-hmm.
that, but it's definitely like you just need to know like the basics again, so when you do like use stuff like that, you can just fill in the blanks and still have it look like, you know, like natural.
Yeah, exactly. And that just comes with studying anatomy. But if there are beginner creators like webtoon creators who are wanting to create a webtoon, or if they're in the process wherever they are, like if they're beginners, I would recommend, if you want to produce a webtoon but you're still not super competent in anatomy, you could use the models, but you also have to understand the limitations with using them. They aren't going to be super, if you're trying to pose them, you'll need to know the limitations of the human body. You can't just make their arms and wrists do like crazy
Yeah.
poses, because that's not how the human body works. Like, even if a character is like tying their hair back, their arms aren't out here, they're like here. So you can't have your model like all the way out there, if that makes
Yeah,
sense.
definitely. Yeah, just knowing the limitations and things like that. I do think if they want to start it, like they can like use it and think, because a lot of people, or at least some videos that I've seen too, like some people are like, oh, like come with me as I start like my webtoon and things, and like here's what I've learned from it, and it's super interesting because a lot of people are like, oh yeah, using 3D models like really helped me gain like more knowledge of anatomy, and I was like, yeah, that is helpful. Like, drawing over something and then you kind of get like a feel. That's why I feel
Mm-hmm.
like it's very weird with like quote unquote tracing. So I
Mm-hmm.
feel like that's also a good key point to like learning something, because you don't just gain muscle memory out of the way.
Mm-hmm.
I just think learning basic anatomy is where it really helps you. So if you do use those, you can really fill in the gaps so your stuff doesn't, like have that weird, like, uncanniness.
Mm-hmm. So for the main characters of Soul on Fire, you have Nika and you have Ophelia. So how did you decide? I know you said you really like the trope of the black cat and the golden retriever. So
Mhm.
how did you implement that into their character designs?
Nika is someone that I've had, like, he's had different names throughout the years. He's looked so different. He actually started out as a blonde, if you can believe
Hmm.
it. I had, like,
I
blonde
can't
Nika.
believe that.
Don't worry, he's not real. He can't hurt you. But he started out blonde, and then, you know, he all of a sudden fell into red hair just because, like, I basically curated him to, like, what I found hot at the time.
Hmm.
So that is how his character, like, came to light. It's like, oh, I like this. So he's always had the same personality, but his look has just changed depending on, like, oh, I like this better. And he was actually supposed to have red hair because he had red hair for the longest time
Hmm.
until before I started really getting into like my comic before I posted it.
Yeah.
Because I drafted him with red hair and I was like, oh, I really love this, but sometimes I look at it and it's like, this guy looks like Ariel. Because I never changed his blue eyes because he's always had blue eyes, period. And just because I like the tropes of like the dark haired, light eyed, mysterious bad boy
Hmm.
curses a lot, which is just so Nika because I don't know, because I curse a lot too, and a lot of his language is just for me.
Yeah.
He's also a big part of me in a way, but yeah, he's just a stockpile of everything I found attractive.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where he came from. And then I've always been a fan. Like, obviously, I'm a big vampire fan. I love fantasy. I love werewolves, things like that. And so that's kind of where their characters stem. Like, I always wanted them, because Ophelia came into the picture a lot later. Again, her name wasn't Ophelia for the longest time.
Mhm.
But yeah, I was like, so he's going to be supernatural in some way. So I'm going to add that into his character. And then, I don't know what. Like, he also started out as a werewolf too,
Mm.
because have to live through my fantasy werewolf boyfriend vibes. And then I was like, well, Ophelia's going to be like human. I just want
Hmm.
her to be like the soft spot. because I like that he's just rude and mean to everyone else. But like,
Yeah.
she'll soften him up. She'll make him
Yeah.
be nice and things just because he's like, I don't have to be like a dick all the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, and Ophelia, she's her biggest inspiration for me is actually, I don't know if anyone has seen Fruits Basket, but the female lead in that one, I guess, yeah, she is the main character, Toru. She's
I love
like,
Toru.
oh my gosh, I love her so, so much. And I also talk about these things too. Like, I think I have my Q&A episode where I kind of like crafted her because I had no idea how I really like. I knew she was human. I know that he would have a soft spot for her. I know it'd be nice, but I also like ping ponged against like, oh, I want her to be strong enough to actually like sass at her back because, enemies to lovers,
Hmm.
super awesome. But I was like, I don't know, just very, again, very indecisive, not knowing until, again, I watched Fruit Basket for like the fifth time. Toru may be like high school girl, but you know what? She like commands the stage when she's there. She's, she's very like nice, but she'll like put herself in like harm's way. And I'm like, that's what I love, that she's a woman of action. So that, I think that's what I was looking for. And I was like, that's very Ophelia.
Yeah. I think it's kind of interesting because sometimes character creation just kind of comes. A lot of the time, like you said, you may have a base for a character, but then it's kind of just like brainstorming and experimenting. I think a lot of the time there's not a super solid process on how you develop your own characters. Like, obviously, you want to give them certain traits and give them a background, give them motives, give them obstacles, that kind of stuff. But yeah, I think sometimes it just kind of comes. I mean, in my case, my characters kind of, how do I explain this? Like, they kind of just came to be. Like, with my main character, I actually kind of gave her attributes that I myself wish I had
Oh,
in a
yeah.
way. Somebody who is struggling with flaws and perfectionism and is kind of learning how to be okay with them. And then the male lead, I kind of just modeled him after all the traits that I love and like all the male leads that I love in books and TV. So he kind of like came together that way. But I think sometimes it's hard to explain exactly how your OCs came to be, and sometimes it just kind of come together on their own.
It's just developing and like you learn a lot. I mean, what definitely helped me, like what I suggest, so I'm not really a writer at all. So I like to say that I distract with pretty photos.
Mhm.
I'm like, oh, my webtoon's really pretty. I mean, if they comment about like the writing sometimes I'm like, well, at least my pictures are pretty. But what really helped me, because I have no idea where to start, I'm not a big writer, I've never really written anything besides essays in my whole life. So I'm just like looking into it, and one good site I found, at least, that helped me really get to know my characters and like kind of set up my story was One Stop for Writers. I think it's really nice because they have just whole like dictionaries of like character motivations and
Mm.
things like that, and things that'll drive your character. And then when you go make a character sheet, they kind of set it up for you that like, they have like a wound or whatnot, and so you like pick that wound, and they have like a whole, again, just whole dictionaries. Like, you can also customize it too if they don't really have like your specific thing in there that you want to add to your character. They always have room for customization and things like that. But when you choose like from their library of things, they give you traits that go along with it,
Mhm.
and things like that. Like maybe things from their past, like, that make them act a certain way now, which really helps you like learn more about your character, and it makes it, at least for me, really like a lot easier to write them.
Yeah. I think
You know,
that's a really
'cause-
difficult part of character creation is making them seem like believable people. Even though
Mhm.
it is fiction, you want to give them traits that make sense. And I a lot of people who are writers recommend when you are building a character and giving them traits, something you can do is look at the people in your own personal life, maybe friends or family, and pick out traits that you like about, or maybe even dislike about them. And you can add that to your character, and that can help you round them out to be more believable.
Mhm. Taking from real life is definitely a good reference. I definitely do too. Again, Nika is like part of me, so I'm just like, fan.
Yeah.
Me and him are just sarcastic and swear a lot, so that's just where that comes from.
Yeah. I mean, I have a pretty solid guess, but who's your favorite character in your webcomic?
Obviously, Nika. Again, I curated him especially for me, so
Hmm.
I already know he's not fan favorite, but it's okay.
He's
Because
not fan favorite?
no, it's more So Shy and Lucifer, which surprise, surprise. I pride myself on drawing super attractive characters because, at least to me, I'm
Hmm.
like, if they're not attractive, then what's the point? So, if I'm not attracted to them, then what the heck? And so, Nika is obviously my favorite.
So, creating your webcomic, you started, when did you start making it?
Like writing or drawing it?
Maybe drawing it.
Drawing it, probably. Sorry, I'm trying to think back officially. I want to say like early 2022
Okay.
is when I.
So, yeah, it's been a couple years since you started drawing it. What are some of the things that you wish you had done differently now that you've been creating it for a while?
Well, obviously, like I tried writing it first, which is super good to do, especially if you're like a planner. You like to know how things go, but I mean, I hate to say it now, but not all of Soul on Fire is written. Not even I know how it ends. Mwahaha. But because again, I'm a writer. I'm indecisive, or I'm not a writer. I'm indecisive.
Hmm.
It's just hard for me sometimes to know the direction I want to go. But I wish I did write a lot more first before I posted, and then second, I wish I did create buffer
Yeah.
before, just because like when I first posted it, like it was purely just for fun because this was very just self-indulgent, and so I just wish I created a lot more in advance before I officially posted, just because I wasn't I wasn't thinking that people were going to like it. Well, after creating the first episode, I was like, dang, this is so much work. So
Yep.
I'm just like, okay, sorry, my episodes are going to be shorter, but it's just how it has to be. Just because if I am creating episodes that are like 100+ panels, like I am going to like, basically burn out so fast. Even though
Hmm.
I draw every day, I love 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 it. Every first thing I do, I wake up in the morning and just go. If I don't have anything else going on, just go and draw. Just because I love doing it, and it's super important. Like, for I don't know, just for what is it called? To grow, to be able to grow. Like even drawing every day, just a silly doodle, whatever. But
Yeah.
yeah, I'm just I get super burned out doing all that stuff. So I'm just like, I gotta shorten this, gotta do that. I wish I had that. And then also one more thing, because I've also talked to some people about it, like not to really care specifically. The term has like webtoon style has been thrown around a lot, and people are like,
Hmm.
my webtoon isn't like, my style isn't webtoon. And I was like, well, that doesn't like necessarily matter. They're like,
Mm-mm.
well, the webtoon has this sometimes like, the super like comics I see that are really popular and that I want to like, my style doesn't look like that. So like, they're like, my style doesn't look like this. I was like, that's fine. Like, please, you cannot compare yourself just because there's so many awesome comics out there that even I read that don't conform to that style at all. And if you do have that style, that's totally fine. Like, it's gorgeous because, people like it. It's a really beautiful style. And, like, people also add their own flares to it.
Yeah.
So I just don't want that to people, like, because you are going to be constantly comparing. Like, I do it all the time. I'm just like, oh man, because I
You
have
do it
other
all the time?
all the time, especially because, like, being an artist in the artist community, like, you have a lot of visuals that are also comic creators, and you look at some of their stuff and you're just like, man, like, I should just put my pencil down, and you sometimes it's like that, but other times it's like motivating.
Yeah.
So, because one of my other, like, Reese, you may know her, she does Russo.
Yep. Love
And
Russo.
so, yeah, dude, her stuff is amazing. And so it's like you don't have to conform to that certain formula just because she's more focused on the cinematography of it, like how it looks and does certain things. Like she's a perfect example of that too.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so I just don't want people to worry about it or be discouraged. Be like, that's also why I don't want to post it, because I feel like people are going to be like, why? But it's just totally fine. Just do it. People will like it. It'll be okay. I promise.
Yeah. And also just do what you want. Don't
Mm.
worry about I know that's a hard thing for people to swallow because a lot of the time they want people to like their story and their webcomic, and so they tend to think of what should I do to make so that other people like it.
Now you're stuck in a place where you are basically just like doing what other people want and not you. You know what I mean? Like you're just like, oh, I did this for myself, but now I'm just like, man, I'm really not inspired by what I'm doing. Like I'm just too worried about if it looks like a certain thing. Now it's more of a hassle than a hobby. I think it's also more rewarding when you do what you want. And people are like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And you're like, oh my God, really? You love it? You love it? Oh, I'm gonna keep doing it.
Yeah.
It's even more of a confidence booster.
Yeah, definitely. And I have quite a few creators that have talked to me and they feel like they're not getting the subscribers they want, they're not getting the likes, and they're not like the numbers aren't as high as they would want them to be. So what would you tell?
So coming from someone who made a comic like just for fun because I wanted to try it, like just do it for you. Like, I mean, it is nice to get validation and things like that, and it's, you know, it it sometimes does feel like, man, people just really aren't into that. But also it's just today's algorithm and things like that. Having to promote yourself like 100% of the time can also be exhausting.
Mhm.
A lot of artists get burnt out and they're like, I'm taking a break from social media because I can't. And it's so relatable because it's like, oh, you're just fighting against this thing constantly. And you're like, I want people to like my stuff. And it's like, hey, one thing that's really helped me, even though like when I first started out, like obviously everyone starts out with 0 followers, zero everything. So it's like, you just got to post about your stuff. Like, obviously, when you want, when you're not burnt out,
Mhm.
like like it's the most popular thing ever, like I always do. And that's also, I forget who said that, but it was on a post that I saw from another webcomic creator that was like, hey, like, you want to know why people like all your stuff? If you post something like a fan art, it gets way more attention than it does like your own characters. It's because people, it's a common character in media. People can relate to them.
Mhm.
Like, it's really easy for people to be like, oh, I love that character because of this. And it's like, well, now, if you just post about your character like that, like, they're the most popular thing on earth. Like, I do that with Nico all the time. I was like, oh my God, look at this guy. Look at him. Look how hot he is. Look what he's doing. Look at him in this. And it's just like, oh my gosh. Or if you, like, just show, like, post stuff and things like that just show a little bit of your personality, or their personality, it really gets people interested in, like, I can relate to that. It's just getting people to relate. But also don't kill yourself over the algorithm and like
Mhm.
have that be the measurement of how good your thing is. Because again, there's so many like things that I've seen, and also I'm not really like a big comic reader myself, which is embarrassing to say. I've only completed two, but of the other ones that I read, a lot of them aren't super popular in terms of like those standards. Like they're not read by like millions, and but it's still a good story and I love it. And I think like as long as you have those fans that are like just diehards, at least for me, it's pushed me, especially in the beginning. People are like, oh my gosh, yes, keep going, please. I love this character. I'm like, oh my gosh, you want to see more? So that's at least how I measure it. So just do it for you. Don't I know it sounds stupid to say coming from someone who's like kind of gaining traction, but I don't consider myself like that. Like, I don't know. I don't think I'm like that the shit. Better, for lack of a better term, I don't really think like that, but I know, so it's hard hearing that advice coming from me of like, oh, just do it for you, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, easy for you to say. And it's like, well, I mean, I did it that way just for myself and because I love the process, and people will see that. They're like, oh,
Mhm.
they really love what they're doing, and you can really tell in their work. And so please have that be the measurement because it will catch on. Again, us artists are working against so many things,
Yeah.
algorithms, things like that.
Yeah. I think it's really hard to not get stuck in the numbers and the comparison trap. Because, even amazing, experienced artists like yourself, you compare yourself to other artists still. And I don't think I mean, at least in my experience, the artists that I have talked to that have been drawing for a really long time as well still feel that. They still get in the comparison, even though on the outside I'm looking at their art and I'm just like, how could you ever be dissatisfied with your art? How could you ever be comparing yourself to another artist?
Yeah.
And it definitely not that I'm happy that they also are comparing themselves and are also can feel not satisfied with their art, but it's just relatable, or what's the
Oh
term
yeah,
I
it's
use?
definitely a part of it because, like you and I, like being how, you know, like proficient we are like in our craft, like we still compare ourselves and it's just relatable and it's
All the
fine.
time.
Yeah, like, and if me, it's a driver. Because again,
Mhm.
like when I get stuff sent from my friends, I'm like, like sometimes it makes me want to put my pen down, but other times I'm like, you know what? Yeah, that's discouraging, especially when you see someone so like early in their art journey, when you've been like, you know, like working at it for years, and sometimes it just clicks with people and it doesn't. But again, it's just like, you just got to keep working at it and don't have it discourage you because everyone's in a different place. Like have it just be a motivator, or if like they like just again like constructing your art style, maybe like take something that from their art style that you like, again
Mhm.
lack for a better term, like saying take, but like just kind of applying that to yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you like a certain thing, like that is the one thing in their art that just blows you away. Ever since I've been gaining mutuals and things like that, like they push me all the time because they also have such fantastic work. And then also being with other creators too, like you and all the other people in our collab, seeing
Yeah.
their things. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, I really need to step it up here and just like learning from all you guys and things like that. It's definitely a motivator too because I think at least my motto is like artists support other artists always. So that's why my DMs are always open and people are always surprised when I talk to them or like when they send me a DM and they're like, "Oh my gosh, I didn't think you respond." I was like, "Dude, I only have like 3 people who talk to me on a constant basis." Like so if you do DM me and you think I won't see it, I do. I am my notification I don't know, notifications are on. I can't really, yeah, like, I know. So if you see it and you ask a question, I will always answer. So I'll tell everyone where I get my assets. I'll do this, and I am working on creating a Patreon at least right now so that I can make those tutorials and just like
Yeah.
really share what I know to help other people because that's all I want is for like, oh, it even makes me emotional now. Just like, because we all used to be that kid that's like, I really wish I knew what they would do, like how they do something. And I'm just like that person that's like, oh, I'll tell you all about it. It's okay. Here it is. There's like very like crystal clear. I'll tell you where to get this. I'll give you links to it. If you want to know a certain thing, I'll send you, especially if you have Clip Studio, I'll just send you the ID.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I had even DM'd you a while ago, and I was like, I want to make his expression more playful and like funny, or
mhm.
just whatever it was. And then you literally like drew over and sent me a piece back of like your suggestions on how I would do it, and I was like, that's so nice of you to even just be willing to spend the time to do that.
It was so fun.
It's also really rewarding to see those artists that you were helped like you saw in the beginning that were just starting, and now like a little while later they're really improving. And it's like if if you had messaged, or if somebody had messaged you asking for help, and then you can just see their progress
Hmm.
over however long of a period of time, it's really rewarding. And you know the art community is really positive and uplifting most of the time, at least
Yeah,
in my
sometimes
experience.
it's really harsh sometimes when it bites you.
Yeah, but I think it's important for artists to support other artists, and if somebody is struggling, to help them if you can, if they want it, right?
Yeah.
It would be kind of weird if you message somebody is like, "Oh, hey, I noticed this about your art. Here, try this." I feel like that would be
Yeah,
really
no,
weird.
it's, that's why only like if people ask for it, like I'll give it to them. They're like, "How do I do
Yeah.
this?" Or like, "How can I improve this?" Oh, I will definitely help you because again, like growing up, like going through art school, doing all this, like a critique helps you get better. So, like, I'm not going to go critique people's work because again, artists support other artists, and if they didn't ask for it, then they're
Hmm.
content with it, they're happy, and that's all I care about.
I I think all artists when they start out, and even if you're an experienced artist, it can still be hard to receive feedback on your art. And I think particularly being a webtoon creator, if you do get popular, if you do get a larger audience, you are also open to people commenting their opinions. And sometimes they can be very in the art community, or just standard term is constructive criticism.
Oh,
That's
definitely.
giving feedback on something that needs improvement, but giving the ways they can improve, right? And I feel like a lot of the time we can open ourselves up to people who are more critical than constructive. They're destructive rather than constructive
Yeah,
with their
no,
criticism.
I definitely see that too because sometimes I scroll through like comments of other things and they're just like, why does this look like that? And like, oh my god, that was bad. And sometimes they focus on it and they're like, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. But also, you got to think like everyone's going to have a certain opinion about stuff. And it also goes back to like, well, even when you ask for the critique, people are going to say things that you don't agree with. So it's
Hmm.
just like, that's okay. Even though it's discouraging if you see like a lot of it. And it's like, ugh. But it's the internet. People are going to say stuff even if they don't
Yeah,
really mean it because some people just like to try and get that rise out of people.
yeah,
So,
yeah. Um, I think I've had other artists talk to me about how they feel like their work is not well received and they get a lot of hateful comments on their webtoon or even on their Instagram. And I try to tell them when I started graphic design 10 plus years ago, however long now it is. And it was really hard to get feedback on my work because back then I was attaching myself to my designs that I was doing for my job and for freelance clients. And for my profession, at least, I learned to not attach myself to the work. And I'm like, okay, you can tear it up, but tell me how to make it better,
mhm,
or tell me what you don't like about it so I can improve it. But it's harder when it's art and it's something that you're passionate about. It's hard to
mhm,
not feel discouraged when the critiques come in or there's hateful comments. But usually, what I try to tell people is be kind to yourself if that happens.
mhm.
Recognize if it is helpful critique or if it's just somebody being hateful. And if they're coming at you saying, your line art sucks, oh, you draw heads weird, then that's their opinion is very invalid in that
Yeah.
case. I don't feel like they have any weight to your art or to, because it comes down to their personal opinion,
Mhm.
right? If it happens, to tell yourself, is this helpful critique or is this somebody being hateful? And if they're being
Absolutely.
hateful, then try to, and it's hard, but try to be like, okay, well, this person is just being mean. So I'm not
Mhm,
going to listen to what they have to say because it's not valuable to me as a creator, right?
mhm.
But again, it is hard to arrive to that mentality about critique or hate comments or whatever it is. But yeah, definitely, you know, we as artists, we have to be kind to ourselves. Perfectionism is really common with us artists, right? We want to be better. We want to be like our favorite artists who are really amazing. But I think it's really important to be kind to yourself and to give yourself grace as you're learning, you know, because the process isn't easy. It it's still not easy.
Yeah, no, especially nowadays, like again, seeing all the different art and different artists and like where they're at and their art journeys and then feeling super discouraged that way. Like sometimes like stuff doesn't even have to be said for you to just feel discouraged.
Yeah.
Like, or you see like you work super hard on this piece and it's like, some of the best rendering you've ever done, and you post it and you're super proud, and then like you realize that like it's not getting as much likes, but then you go like on your For You or something like that and you see something that like, it's just a little doodle or something, and that just gets like millions of views, and that's
Yeah.
really discouraging, and you're just like, wow. And then you try to push yourself, because I did it for a time where I was like, what's trending right now? What's this? What's that? Like, oh, I notice sometimes when I use like super trendy sounds, like, my stuff gets seen more. But again, like what inspires me is like music and stuff like that. So just know anything I post with like music, which I do all the time, like it has meaning, it actually goes. It takes me so long to like choose
Mhm.
a song for anything because music inspires 100% of the shit I do. Sometimes it's like, no, this is what inspired this piece and it needs to go to this music for it to like mean something to me and for it to
Yeah.
be like completed. And that's totally fine. Because again, I'll post whatever, even if no one's heard of the song, no one, whatever. It's a very niche thing, for this specific scene. Like, don't have it be discouraging, and it just sucks that something like that will dictate whether, however many people will see your work. Because I've seen so many, I also follow so many fantastic artists who like at least in terms of like quote unquote popularity, like don't have many followers. And again, I don't use that to gauge on how like talented an artist is,
Mhm.
because again, we all start somewhere. We all start at like 0 followers, and the algorithms like messed up nowadays, so
Yeah,
you
it's
never know
awful.
what will hit. A lot of them post a lot of really wonderful things, and it just like, I just hope that they know, or at least everyone knows, like when you put your heart and stuff into this piece, like, it's really easy to get discouraged, but please just post it. Post it with the music you like. Don't worry about if you
Yeah.
post it like at a certain time of day to get more views. Just please, because then someone always comes across your page and they're just like, oh my gosh, especially when I was starting out too, people were like, oh my gosh, why isn't this, like, why don't people see that? And again, that can also be a motivator that someone loves it so much to be able to like comment like, oh my gosh, why aren't more people seeing this? And you're like, oh my gosh, do you think people should see my work? Because it's just super nice. And so, yeah, again, there's a lot more ways to get like discouraged than there is to be motivated,
Mhm.
which sucks,
Mhm.
but it's just part of the art world, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So, before I get into our fan questions, I did want to ask you one more.
Yes.
As you've been creating your webtoon the last couple of years and then publishing it this year, what has been the most rewarding aspect of it for you?
Again, it's the comments and interactions, because I love it. Like I said, I'll respond to any DM. I love talking with people. I love comments. I love the engagement because I
Yeah.
love talking to people who are also into the stuff I'm into.
Mhm.
Again, I label myself as a yapper because I yap, I talk a lot. So, especially things that we both love and have in common. Like, I'm a big oversharer too. Like, there's some people I talk with that have seen like different things that I haven't posted yet, or they're like, oh, I love this about your character. It's like, oh, here's all this artwork too that goes along with it.
You
Like,
sent some to me. It's
oh
great.
yeah, I do all the time. Like, if you ask for it, I'll just give it to you.
It's wonderful.
Like,
I
it's
love it.
fine, yeah. And some people are so surprised, like, oh my gosh, like you said. I was like, yes, just look at it, please. It adds to our conversation. So,
Yeah.
yeah, definitely the comments, the interaction, and people, having that feeling of like putting something out that's super near and dear to your heart, and other people being like, oh, I love this. Oh my gosh. Like, just kind of playing along with you. Also, once I start putting more episodes out, like, I love when people talk about like my work, period. And so like, if you want to draw my characters, go for it. Like, if you want to use it for a light study, if you want to do this, if you want to do anything like besides post my art and say it's yours,
Mhm.
like, I love the engagement. I love it. Tag me, let me know. I just love talking about it with people. That's the most rewarding thing, and connecting me with people, like my other friends that are super into it, and we just talk and yap all the time. So
Mhm.
that's the most rewarding thing. And then, coming from at least the in real life community where like art isn't really celebrated here, like there's not really a lot of a like art outlet.
Yeah.
And so I never really connected until I went to college, and then I started like being like, no, I want to do this. And then actually finding an art community on the internet has been so rewarding because it's
Mhm.
like, wow, I didn't know that there were people like you know, like do comics and things like that and do graphic design and just like it's so interesting to talk to people and just like know their stories, know like the
Mhm.
art they create, and then again just like trading all around, and then all our art styles just instantly like improve because
Yeah.
we're just like pushing each other and
Yeah.
not growing up with like anything like that is just like, oh, that's rewarding.
Absolutely. I feel the same. When I first started posting my art, at least I didn't do this very well in the beginning. I kind of just started making a webcomic without studying the basics of art and storytelling. I just kind of went into it. And it felt kind of lonely at first because I didn't really have the community that I have now.
Hmm.
When I was excited about a piece I did, not many people saw it, not many people commented, and I didn't have any real life art friends either. So there wasn't anyone that I could be like, hey, I just finished this episode of my webcomic. Like, I'm so happy with it. I mean, I had my husband, which is obviously
Yeah.
wonderful, but there wasn't any artist friends that I had. And so I agree with you. Having the community aspect of it is really rewarding because everyone is so positive and uplifting and supportive.
Yeah, because again, artists support other artists always, at least for me, and so it's super nice to finally have a community. Yeah, because it is lonely when you first start, because you're like, man, no one can really relate to this. Like my friends don't really like understand this. Like, I mean, the only other person I talk about it is kind of with my husband, but even then, he doesn't really understand.
Yeah.
He's just like a guy's guy, blue collar worker type person who is not really artsy in any way.
Hmm.
So like besides like my in real life friends, like they only uh, get it to like a certain point, but then, actually finding a community of people to talk about it and be like, oh my gosh, where's this been all my life? Because again, I
Hmm.
wasn't fortunate to have that. So it's just like, oh, if you do art, you're not going to make any money, period. And it was just like, so a lot of people were like steered out of that in my hometown personally. It's like you either do sports or you need to be super good at math. You need to do this. Like a lot of people go and they like do business and things like that. I
Hmm.
was like, well, art has always just been the one thing like I'm good at. And so sometimes it's just so disheartening to be like, well, the only thing I'm good at, I'm being told isn't a career.
Hmm.
So that's why I'm just glad that nowadays it is. There's so much more you can do with art, and
Yeah.
it's more than just graphic design, too.
Hmm.
Because I know it's what you do, and you are so talented at it, and
Thank
I'm
you.
so jealous. Like, because oh man, I wish I had that because people who know how to do graphic design well, like, have a really good eye for aesthetics and can really put stuff together that looks super cohesive. Because again, when you sent me, like, the questions for this, I was like, oh my god, this sheet is fantastic. Like, I was just prepared for, like, just a blank Google Docs thing that had my questions and that was it. But no, it's, like, fully done. It even has my series thumbnail on it. Like,
Yep.
I envy you guys so much,
Oh.
but for a long time, that was the only, like, creative outlet for artists, was just to
Hmm.
go that direction, but not, that doesn't click with everyone,
Yeah.
and me in particular. Like I told my professors because I had to do graphic design for part of my major, and I was like, Dawn, I hate this, I'm not doing it. Like, I'm sorry, I cannot create another poster. I can't do it. I just want to draw, I want to illustrate. And so, because it's just another type of creativity, and like I'm just glad there's way more outlets nowadays to be
Yeah.
able to like, reach out and do.
I will say there are some aspects of graphic design that can actually help you improve artistically, which, like the fundamentals of art in general, you have focal point, you have value, you have balance, you have movement, you have rhythm.
Mhm.
All those things can also tie into creating a composition for an art piece as well. And, I tell this to my beginner or to people who are beginners asking me for advice. I tell them study those fundamentals and then also study fundamentals of anatomy. Maybe start with figure drawing or just gesture and then study drapery. It will help you go
Yeah.
a long way.
Yeah, no, 100%. Like, I think graphic design is super important. Just because I say I hate it doesn't mean it's not important.
Yeah, yeah, of course.
Just because, like, graphic design has taught me a lot. Again, like, it teaches you composition, it teaches you,
Hmm.
like, this, it teaches you, like, points of tension. And just, like, if you're just wondering why things don't, like, look good on a page, and you just don't know why, like, having those, graphic design fundamentals can really help you with that, like knowing contrast, knowing this, knowing that. Like, I also think color theory is super important, even though
Hmm.
people are like, man, color theory. And like, most of me and my friends are like, yeah, we know it, but sometimes we don't use it.
Yeah.
Hence why my page and all my stuff is super saturated, because I'm a color whore. But it's, it's just knowing the rules so you can break them, or,
Hmm.
knowing graphic design is super important, period. And I'm glad I got those courses, just because, like, it does help you with illustration, even when you're like, "Ugh, well, I don't really use any of that." It's like, yeah, you do. You don't need to be like really good at certain aspects of graphic design,
Hmm.
but, you know just knowing it can help your piece be so much more elevated than if you didn't.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Okay, let's get into our fan questions.
Ooh.
A lot of them were the same questions.
If
So
it's when the next episode is coming out,
there actually was a few questions where people were like, "Hey, when's the next episode?"
I get that every time I post something, like, so when's the next up? Like,
Yeah, it's like,
I'm trying, I promise.
yeah. Well, it's understandable. Your art is very complex and detailed, and yeah, it definitely is understandable. It takes you a long time.
Thank you.
Okay, so our first question, Duchess Art One asked, well, we kind of touched on this, but maybe you could get more specific. What inspired you to make the story slash what made you decide to make this webtoon?
The clicking point for me, so, like, for the longest time, I never planned to make it a comic. I never planned to, like, put it out there. It was just like these silly OCs in my head, or like Nika I've had for a long time. But what really pushed it was just, like, I guess reading my first comic was Unholy Blood.
Love
And so
Unholy
that was
Blood.
so, like, her art is absolutely amazing. And it's just one of the things where it's like, you know what? Yeah, I want to do this.
Yeah.
I want to try it. I think I've always wanted to. And what am I going to do with these characters in my head if they still sit here? I
Hmm.
want to get it out. I want to, even if people don't really care about their journey, whatever's going on, I just want to do it just for myself. Because again, it was just a full self-indulgent thing, where I'm like, oh, I have so many aspects of stories I like, but what if I just condensed it into a whole thing that where it's just stuff I like? So I know I'll love it 100% of the time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Sushi Cat Go asked, do you like using warm light or cool light?
Definitely warm. Yeah, I definitely like warm, just because I love warm weather. I think it's a lot easier for me, I don't know, to see the light. I just like high contrast situations, and I think when it's sunny and warm, that's where I find the most, like, contrast. And so, lighting is my favorite thing to do. Like, everything else is blah, but as soon as I get to the stage of like, oh my gosh, lighting,
Hmm.
like, that's what I'm about. So definitely warm. If every chance I get, I'm like, oh, warm lighting this, warm lighting that. And so that's why throughout my comic, it's always warm and sunny. And I'm just like in a panic, because there is a lot of it that'll also take place like in the snow.
Hmm. Yeah. I noticed that your strong suit is definitely the lighting part. But Starry Rim asked, how did you decide on the name of your webtoon?
Man, that was also super hard, because you're just like, I you just create this stuff and you're like, what do I call it? What will
Hmm.
encapsulate all this? And so I kind of just looked into more of the themes that play into it in the story I created. And I was like, obviously fire, because Nika's the demon god of fire, and it had to be something like that. And also, like, souls play really, like, a really important role in my comic. And because people always, like, say such the thing that eyes are the window to the soul and things like that, and that's why I always love drawing eyes. Yeah, and then finally I just took a lot of words and stuff and put them on a piece of paper and just started putting them together like a puzzle. And I was like,
Hmm.
soul on fire is kind of intense, and it kind of encapsulates everything, and that's I almost did some with butterflies too, because butterflies also
Mm,
represent souls, and that's why you see them in my comic too. Just so whenever you see a butterfly, it is someone's soul. I put soul and fire together, and I was like that part, and that it just stuck from there. I was like, perfect. I really like that actually. I was like, something has to be on fire.
yeah. Yeah, it's a great title. It's very memorable too.
Thank you. I hope so.
Okay. So our last question, Cecily asked, who were her inspirations in the artistic field?
I have a lot. So traditionally, especially in college, Caravaggio.
Oh,
At
I love
least for me,
Caravaggio.
yes.
It's my
I
favorite.
did. Yeah. So when we did like our painting, God, what was it? Our master copies, which is basically, again, elevating your art style is basically studying other people's like work. So what better than to like study the greats? And a lot of people do it.
Hmm.
Like my professor did it with us because he does one every class just to see how much he's improved. And
Mm,
so, sometimes, it's just using their piece as a study. And so I copied like Caravaggio's like David and Goliath, and just from there I've always like loved his work. It's so like heavy contrast and just like really it kind of goes into dark themes and things like
yeah.
that, which obviously I love. I'm into dark gore, blood, comedy, all of it.
Hmm.
So his stuff is also that, and then also the story behind his stuff too. Like I didn't know if people knew this, but the story behind like David and Goliath, like David is his ex-lover, and then his face is Goliath,
Hmm.
like showing how much he like broke his heart and things like that. So it's super dramatic and everything I'm about. So that's him like traditionally. And then digitally I would have to say, oh man. I guess I just yeah, I guess everyone in the art community, a lot of like my friends, even though that's super like, power friendship to say, but they all like inspire me because again, that's definitely how I elevate my art style in terms of like, oh, here's what they're doing. Like, oh my gosh, like that's so inspiring,
Hmm.
especially sitting down like with my because I've never had this experience ever, like sitting down with my art friends, like Live, like Super Blonde, and then
Yeah.
Scar, and so like I've never had that experience, like us inspiring each other so much, and so that's why I'm like super hyper fixated on it because we're just constantly like inspiring in each other.
Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely helpful to get ideas from your mutuals too. Yeah. And I'm with you there. A lot of my art friends are very inspirational to me. I have so many art friends who are such talented artists, and I'm like, you deserve more recognition and more
Absolutely.
support. Yeah.
Like especially everyone in our collab, like even though a lot of them are like really like successful and things like that, sometimes I'm just like, more people need to see it.
Yeah,
Like
well,
more
see,
more people need this.
yeah, that's why I was part of a collab a little while ago with some really talented
Mhm.
artists, and they all blew me out of the water, but it was amazing. And I was like, I love finding new artists to support, and I love, trying what I can do, like doing what I can do to support them in some way. And so the collab really was for me to be able to like get these artists more exposure somehow and like more support because they're so talented and they deserve it. And I love all their webtoons.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. Everyone's so talented. It blows me away.
And again, that's is such a big motivator when everyone around you is just like, oh wow. And most of the time, it makes me want to pick up the pencil and be like, oh yeah, well I'm gonna do this too.
um, okay, I will ask you one more question before we end, but what is the message you want readers to take away from reading your story? I know it's left field and I didn't include it into our script,
No,
but
it's all good. It's just like, man, because again, I am still currently writing it
mhm.
and still very troubled. Like a lot of it, like that I'm working right now, is written. So some of the stuff is just super straightforward. But I guess everyone can change. I think I don't know. That's
Like, you know,
yes.
despite your past, despite your trials, you can still grow and
Yeah, which I
yeah.
think relates a lot today, especially to the art community and then cancel culture.
Mhm.
You
Yeah.
know, like again, I'm not making my story about cancel culture, but just to relate it to something like that. Like, that's why I hate it so much, just because you know, people grow from their mistakes, and that's all I care about. Is if people can have their feelings and stuff, and if someone does something that hurt your feelings and you can never like support them or like look at their work again, that's totally fine. No one can tell you how to feel, and because those are your feelings. And but what I look for is like, did they grow? Did they actively try to like change themselves? You know what I mean? And things like that. And so, because sometimes it's always so strewn in the art community, one person can say something that really, can mess with your reputation, because again, people will blindly get behind it sometimes and not even know, and just take it from word of mouth, not even knowing the real situation, and just being like, yeah, let's cancel them. I don't like them anymore because they did this and that. And it's like, well, people can change. It's just stuff like that.
Mhm.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Just like, there's a lot of themes to it. And or like obviously like true love, blah blah blah. Because I'm also a big sap for that.
Mhm.
So there will be tropes like that where it's like, ah, yes, true love will always triumph
Mhm.
over things. The one thing I do not want is like power of friendship. So sorry, no power of friendship over here. I will make you cry as seen.
No.
Okay, I am not afraid. R.I.P. Reyes, but you know what? It is what it is.
Like literally the intro to your webtoon is a horrible tragedy.
I know, and it's like builds character, but I'm very, again, it's just a story of stuff that I like and just put into one, so it's really hard to just pinpoint a thing where
Mhm.
people, I mean, they can take a lot of stuff from my comic and they can interpret it however way they want, so it's just really hard to just have a main theme for it, other than like, it's mostly, I want to say the biggest one, change, and then like the soul's journey through life and things like that, how you can grow as a person.
Mhm. Well, tell me, what is Soul on Fire about?
So, Soul on Fire is basically about Nika and Ophelia. Their journey, like, start. So, it's like adjacent to that in a fantasy world where, like, demons aren't really known to, like, people. So, Lucifer is kind of like the catalyst to all of it. He's the one who kind of created these demons that kind of just run all over the world and kind of just do evil. And so he created these demon gods, or not, well, he's the one who creates demon gods, which are the really strong. There's 7 of them. Nika's one of them. There's Eve, and there's also a couple other ones too, but they are the ones that he created himself, like giving him his blood and stuff, and now they go out and create like lower level demons who kind of just cause a ruckus.
Mhm.
And so Nika, like when the story starts, he's already like 3 years into like his journey being this way. And if you've seen some of my other art, like obviously he didn't look like that as like a human
Mhm.
and stuff. And so it changes you in ways like that.
Mhm.
And so like when we catch up with Nika, he's already 3 years into his journey. He saves Ophelia. So, they have to end up traveling together and things like that. It's just their journey. But again, like a way they keep, like the world keeps these like demons from basically eating everyone up, is this special like force of the church that isn't really known, but it's like funded by like these nobles. And the nobles in my story are basically like, these really really rich people, and so they're the ones who control like a lot. They control the church, they control this, they control a lot of politics and things like that. And so they are the ones like who are well aware of like demons and stuff like that, but they're not really too worried about like, trying to make the public known of them, just because they do some shady stuff too. And so they're the only ones who kind of know the difference between like a demon and a human, so they go out and exterminate them and things like that. Yeah, there's a lot about it. I don't want to spoil too much, but yeah, it's basically what it's about, and it's also basically also a love story again.
Mhm.
Because I wanted to write a romance so bad, but
Yeah.
not all of it is super heartwarming. A lot of it's action, a lot of it's different things of comedy and gore and stuff like that. So I have to look at the Webtoon guidelines. So, because it,
Okay, Ty, thank you so much for appearing on the podcast. It was an honor to talk to you and learn more about you and discussing your webcomic. Thank you so much.
yeah, thank you for having me. It was an honor to be on here when you asked me. I was so excited.
Yeah, me
It's like,
too.
yes, I love talking. Let's do it.
Yeah, absolutely. If you found this podcast useful or entertaining, please leave a comment, give us a follow. You can follow us on our socials at the Webtoon Wave or on Instagram. You can watch us on YouTube. You can listen to us on Spotify. All those links will be included in the show notes. I will also include all of Ty's links to her webcomic and her Instagram. So stay creative, stay inspired, and we'll see you next time.